Life's meaninglessness is a gift. Albert Camus' philosophy. What if the greatest gift life ever gave you was nothing? No divine plan, no cosmic purpose, no predetermined destiny. Just you, alone in a silent universe that shrugs at your suffering and doesn't answer your cries. That sounds terrifying, right? But what if I told you, what if I showed you that this emptiness, this utter meaninglessness, is actually the most liberating truth you will ever face? That's what Albert Camus understood better than almost anyone. And in this video, we're going to dive into his radical, exhilarating philosophy that doesn't just cope with meaninglessness, it celebrates it. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and realize that everything you believed in, God, fate, karma, soulmates, the whole idea that everything happens for a reason, was fabricated. Not by malicious intent, but by human desperation in the face of the unknown. Imagine realizing this not in a moment of despair, but in a moment of honesty. What remains when all illusions are stripped away? Camus calls this moment the absurd. The absurd isn't a joke, it's not meaningless in the way we usually think about nihilism. It's the collision, the tension between our relentless desire for meaning and the cold, indifferent universe that offers none. We ask, "Why am I here?" and the universe responds with silence. Not rejection, not hostility, just silence. And in that silence, many people panic. They flee into religion, ideology, distraction. But Camus, he stares directly into that void and says, "Okay, so there's no meaning. Now what?" Now it gets interesting, because Camus doesn't say we should despair, he says we should revolt, not with weapons or anger, but with conscious defiance. If life has no inherent meaning, then it is up to us to live anyway, to create value, to experience joy, to love, to fail, to laugh, to cry, all without needing a cosmic permission slip.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the twist that makes Camus so powerful. He doesn't see this as tragic. He sees it as beautiful. If life is meaningless, then we're free. Free to write our own stories. Free to find wonder in the temporary. Free to make this brief, absurd life into something radiant, not because it matters to the universe, but because it matters to us. Let me ask you something that might rattle your core. Would life still be worth living if you knew absolutely that it had no higher purpose? And if not, why not? Are you living for something beyond you, or are you living because you are? Camus uses the myth of Sisyphus to make his point. You know the story. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only for it to roll back down each time. It's a punishment, a cosmic joke. But Camus flips it and says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Why? Because Sisyphus owns his fate. He embraces the absurdity. He doesn't curse the gods, he laughs. He finds meaning in the act itself, not in the outcome. That's what we miss. We're obsessed with outcomes, with achievements, with getting somewhere better. But what if there is no better? What if it's all just pushing boulders? Would you still push yours if it had no final destination? Or are you only playing the game because you think there's a prize at the end? Camus's philosophy isn't just an academic exercise, it's a call to action. It's a way of life. Because once you accept that the universe owes you nothing, you stop waiting. You stop hoping for some external rescue, and you start living fully, recklessly, authentically. He writes, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." That's not resignation, That's exaltation. That's power. That's the kind of freedom most people never taste because they're too busy asking, "What's the point?" when they should be asking, "What can I do with this absurd freedom I've been given?" And this is where it gets personal, because I'm not just talking about philosophy, I'm talking about you, your life, your choices, your fears, your hopes. What are you doing with the absurd? Are you running from it, or are you dancing with it? Are you building a life that matters to you, or are you waiting for someone to tell you what matters? We all want answers, but sometimes the real power comes when we stop demanding answers and start living the questions. When we stop fearing meaninglessness and start seeing it as a blank canvas, not a void, but a space of potential. So here's my question for you. If you knew life had no meaning, what would you stop doing? And more importantly, what would you finally start doing? We all want answers, but sometimes the real power comes when we stop demanding answers and start living the questions. When we stop fearing meaninglessness and start seeing it as a blank canvas, not a void, but a space of potential. So here's my question for you. If you knew life had no meaning, what would you stop doing? And more importantly, what would you finally start doing? There's a strange moment when you lean too far back in a chair, just before you tip over. That instant of weightless uncertainty where you realize you've lost control. Most of us panic in that moment. We grasp, we tense up, we try to regain balance. But what if, instead of resisting that fall, you leaned into it? What if the fall itself became freedom? Albert Camus believed that once we accept life's lack of inherent meaning, we don't become weaker, we become infinitely stronger. Because that moment of existential vertigo, that sense of collapse, is not the end of meaning, it's the beginning of freedom. The structure we thought we needed, the cosmic story, the divine plan, the ladder to some higher purpose, that was never truly holding us up. It was a crutch. And once we realize we don't need it, we're no longer bound by it. Think about how many decisions you've made because you thought you had to, because society, religion, tradition, or fear told you it was the right thing. But right according to what? Camus challenges us to ask, if there's no ultimate scoreboard, no eternal judge, then why not live authentically? Why not build a life based on truth rather than illusion? That's the fall. That's the terrifying liberation, and it's where real power begins. Here's the paradox. The moment you accept that nothing matters, everything begins to matter more. Not because it lasts forever, but precisely because it doesn't. A sunset becomes more beautiful when you know it's fleeting. A laugh with someone you love becomes sacred when you realize it's not part of some destiny, it's just this. Just now. The ephemeral becomes the essential. We've been conditioned to think that meaning must be handed down from above, that it has to be discovered like a hidden treasure. But what if meaning isn't something you find? What if it's something you make? Camus invites us to become artists of our own existence, not to paint by numbers, but to create boldly, chaotically, joyfully, to sculpt lives that reflect not what we were told to value, but what we actually value when stripped of all illusion. And here's where the real challenge comes in. Freedom is frightening. It's easier to be told what to do, what to believe, how to live. It's comforting to think there's a grand narrative you're part of. But Camus rips that away, not to leave you empty, but to give you back the reins. Once you realize there's no script, you stop being a character and become the author. So let me ask you, what would your life look like if you stopped living as if it had to mean something and started living as if it were a work of art, not a masterpiece judged by critics, but a raw, honest expression of you? What risks would you take? What lies would you stop telling yourself? What dreams would you no longer postpone? The absurd isn't an excuse to avoid responsibility. It's the ultimate invitation to take full responsibility. If there's no divine plan, then you are the source of your own values. That's not nihilism. That's ownership. That's maturity. That's evolution. Camus doesn't want us to despair. He wants us to awaken. He wants us to see that the universe's indifference is not a curse, it's a blank page. And when you stop waiting for permission to live, you start creating something truly astonishing, a life that burns brightly, not because it lasts forever, but because you chose to light it. So, here's the deeper question. Are you brave enough to live without justification, to love without promise, to find joy without need for eternal reward? Or are you still hoping that someone somewhere will tell you that your life matters? The courage to revolt, how to live with passion in an indifferent world. To revolt doesn't mean to riot in the streets or shout into the void. In the philosophy of Camus, revolt is something far more intimate, more enduring. It is the silent, daily act of choosing to live fully, even when life offers no ultimate reward. It is waking up every morning, knowing the universe owes you nothing, and still deciding to engage with it deeply. It's not the kind of rebellion that burns itself out in anger, but the kind that endures through love, through laughter, through creativity, and yes, even through suffering. Camus said, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." That's the essence of the absurd hero, not someone who conquers the world, but someone who refuses to be defeated by it. Someone who sees the silence of the cosmos and answers it with music. Someone who knows there is no heaven, yet still gazes at the stars and finds them beautiful. That person isn't naive. They're not in denial. They're awake, radically, painfully awake, and they live anyway. This revolt is not about hope. Camus was wary of hope because hope is often the mask we wear to avoid facing reality. We say, things will get better, or there must be a reason, and we cling to those phrases like life rafts. But Camus cuts through all of that. He says, no, don't hope, don't wait, don't pretend, live now in the face of your own mortality in full awareness of your limits, and do it with your whole heart. Living with passion in a world that's indifferent to your passion is one of the most courageous acts you can perform. Think of the artist who paints, knowing their work may never be seen. The parent who nurtures a child in a world filled with uncertainty. The friend who shows up even when connection feels fragile. These are not meaningless acts. They are acts of revolt. They are declarations that even in the absence of cosmic meaning, human meaning is real, and it's enough. Camus doesn't ask us to be happy. He asks us to be alive. And there's a difference. Happiness, as we often define it, is conditional. It depends on outcomes, on circumstances, on things going our way. But aliveness? That's deeper. That's the fire that burns even in the coldest night. It's the decision to feel everything, the joy, the grief, the absurdity, and keep going, not because you're guaranteed anything, but because this is your one life, and that, in itself, is sacred. So, I ask you this, what would it look like for you to revolt, quietly, in your everyday life, not to escape the absurd, but to embrace it, not to seek meaning, but to create it? Can you look at a meaningless world and still say yes, not because it's perfect, but because you are here? Can you love without needing a reason, create without needing recognition, and live without needing a script? That's the courage Camus calls us to. Not the courage of illusion, but the courage of truth. The kind that doesn't wait for the world to change, but becomes the change itself. The joy of the absurd, why embracing death makes life radiant. At the heart of Camus' philosophy lies a truth so often avoided, yet so essential. We are going to die, not metaphorically, not someday in a distant future we can ignore, but truly, absolutely, and inescapably. And while that may sound grim, Camus believed this acknowledgement of death, raw, unsoftened, unavoidable, is not a source of despair, it is the very source of our joy. Because only when we face death directly can we finally begin to live. Most people live with one foot in the future. We delay joy, avoid risk, postpone authenticity, all in the name of some later that may never come. We live as if we're immortal, as if time will wait for us to figure it all out. But the absurd reminds us that there is no later. There's only now. Death is the great clarifier. It strips away the distractions, the excuses, the illusions. It asks us urgently and honestly, if you know you're going to die, what is worth doing while you're alive? Camus doesn't want us to worship death, he wants us to befriend it, to see it not as a distant threat, but as a constant companion, not to fear it, but to let it sharpen our senses, to make every moment more vivid. Your coffee tastes richer when you know it may be your last. The laugh of someone you love cuts deeper when you remember it too is fleeting. The absurd doesn't diminish life, it intensifies it. It cranks up the volume on existence. To embrace death is not to become passive, it is to become intense, fully present, fiercely awake. When you stop pretending there's a grand meaning waiting to be revealed, you start noticing the small, incandescent truths scattered throughout your life. The way sunlight spills onto your floor in the morning, the sound of rain on your roof, the quiet miracle of your own breath. These are not distractions, they are the point. This is why Camus said that the absurd life is a joyful one, because once you stop demanding that life be something other than what it is, you can finally love it for what it is. Not perfect, not eternal, just here, just yours. And in that fragile, temporary beauty, there is more wonder than any philosophy or religion could ever promise. So the final question is this: are you willing to live a life that ends? Not in theory, but in practice. Are you willing to love people who will die, to create things that will vanish, to be someone who, in time, will be forgotten? Can you do all that, not in sadness, but in celebration? Because if you can, then you've grasped the heart of Camus' message. You've understood that life's meaninglessness is not a void to be filled, it's a gift to be opened. You've seen that death is not your enemy, but your reminder. And most of all, you've realized that this absurd, fleeting, beautiful life doesn't need a reason to be lived. It only needs your presence. So don't wait. Don't hope. Don't ask for permission. You are here, you are alive, and that is enough. Now go live like it.